Hey everybody, we're back again for another movie retrospective, going all the way back to the early 1970s for this shit right here.
Yeah.
This is Last House on the Left.
Yeah.
Which is, it's a pretty notorious film. Wes Craven's directorial debut, ostensibly. Though I think I have heard that he actually had done porn before this. And this is like kind of the first movie that he says that he directed. I mean, he did do like hardcore and softcore porn later on, like with Sean Cunningham, who, got famous later on for doing Friday the 13th. But, so Last House on the Left came out in 1972. Now, it's probably, I mean, I always liked this movie. It's very amateurish. It's very cheap. It was made for, I think, $87,000. Was actually pretty financially successful. Ended up making over $3 million when it was released in theaters. It's really, it's honestly kind of like a porn film from the 70s, but with horrible violence instead of sex in it.
Yeah, it's weird. It's got, what's weird about it is that it's kind of surreal. You got this couple and then this other guy, and they're all kind of screwing each other, and they abduct these two girls and do fucked up shit to them and then kill them.
Yeah.
Like, and it's weird because when you watch a movie you're like, this isn't very realistic, people wouldn't do this. But then you go back and you go look at, say, like some of the films that Charles Ning and Leonard Lake made.
Yeah.
Of real victims, you think that looks fake too.
Yeah.
The real thing kind of looked fake. I guess when you're doing bad shit to someone, they kind of go into a different state of mind where they're kind of like in denial.
Well, yeah, because it's like when you have something like that happen to you, your brain is just kind of like, nope.
They're like, nope.
Not dealing with that.
And then like the dudes that are doing it are almost kind of like real second-rate fantasy role-playing type guys. It doesn't look like they're really doing it.
Yeah.
Now the videos that Lake and Ning made, it doesn't show them actually killing them, but it shows the beginning part of the fucked up shit that they did to those girls, You can even find it on YouTube. There's more to it, but it's just, it's not in the public sphere as far as I know.
Yeah.
But, it doesn't look real.
Yeah.
It is, though.
A lot of that kind of stuff doesn't
Right.
look real to me, just because, like I said, your brain goes to a different place.
So then you kind of see this, and it kind of has that same tackiness to it.
Oh, yeah.
But after seeing, like, the real thing, you go, no, it's actually kind of like that.
It is kind of like that. Well, I think that was something that a lot of people found disturbing about this movie, because I'm going to say, okay, it was made in 1972, like I said. It was very cheap. A lot of the actors were inexperienced, had never been in a movie before, or had only been in porn, or, softcore or hardcore porn. And it shows. But in another way, I think that almost kind of contributes more to its, like, creepiness, because it almost seems, it has a real, like, almost snuff film kind of aspect to it.
Yeah, it looks real if you've seen the real thing.
Yeah.
It kind of has the same tone. At least in those days, it's dated. Talking about 70s.
Oh yeah, and it's definitely a 70s exploitation film.
Right.
It's not, the production value isn't much better. Like
And Leonard Lake and Charles Ning, they were in the 80s, but they were so retro. They were almost like something from the 70s, and you know what I mean. And these freaks in this movie here kind of reminded me of Leonard Lake and Lake and Charles Ning.
Yeah,
kind of like that.
Now, I think something about this movie, and maybe a lot of people know this, I'm not really sure, but Wes Craven, even though, yes, you could argue that this is a cheap exploitation film, but Wes Craven was actually like a big, he was a college graduate, and he was like really into film. He was really into Ingmar Bergman. This is actually sort of a loose remake of Ingmar Bergman's The Virgin Spring, which came out in 1960, which was actually based on an old Swedish folk song about, I think she was like a little shepherd girl or something like that, and she's walking through the woods, and she is set upon by 4 men and raped and killed. These 4 men then end up at her parents' house or her father's house, and the father exacts revenge. So it's basically a revenge story. I've also seen it compared to Straw Dogs, the Sam Peckinpah film, which it is very much like that. What Wes Craven was trying to do, I think, because he thought that a lot of movies that came out, even violent ones, like westerns and stuff, he said, I still felt like there was a little bit of glamorizing of the violence going on. He's like, so I wanted to make a film that made the violence really realistic so people could see what it was really like. So it would be, he's like, I didn't want it to be like sexy or glamorized or anything like that. I wanted it to be like horrible and sickening because that's really what it would be like in that situation. So I don't know if people got that that's what he was trying to do, but that's what he was trying to do, and that's why he made it that unflinching. And that, and I think he did, and that's what I said. That's why I think a lot of people were upset by this movie back then.
It looks tacky as hell. It looks just like crime scene stuff.
Yeah, it definitely does. Like I said, it's still a very cheap movie, and it still has it has a very sleazy porn movie aspect to it. But on the other hand, he also...
Everything in the 70s kind of did, though.
It did, though, yeah. I mean, especially because I think that when they filmed it, like I said, they filmed it for under $90,000. And they didn't have, top-of-the-line equipment, obviously. And I think they shot it, in a smaller, aspect version that had to blow it up. So it looks like... Parts of it kind of look like, the Bigfoot film. It's, not that bad. But it's it has that gritty... realistic verite kind of.
You think some shit's gonna go down at any second?
Yeah.
Some bush and shit.
But is there even bush?
Looks like it's gonna happen. I don't think there was.
Not that I know of, but there was a bunch of other horrible shit in this as well. And I should note too, and I might get into this a little bit later, but because this film was so notorious, there are numerous different cuts of this film floating around. I have the Blu-ray. I got it for cheap at FYE. I think it was like $3 or something. And it says unrated on it. However, I have heard that even the ones that say unrated on it still have some shit cut out.
Right.
Because what ended up happening was that, back in the 70s, I don't know if you guys knew this, but particularly these kind of exploitation sort of films, they would go to they would have so many prints made, and then they would go to regional theaters. They would play in one region for a time, and then they would move on to another region. So there were only so many copies of the movie. Now, what Wes Craven has said is that he would send the prints to the regional theaters. And the theater owners were so offended by the movie that they started cutting them up themselves. And so sometimes they would get the prints back and they would be all cut up. And there would be stuff missing. And so they would have to try and put it back together before it went to the next thing. So there have been a lot of scenes subsequently, and I don't know if this is legend or if this is actually true, but there were some scenes that were lost. I think on the Blu-ray there's a couple that they don't even have sound or anything like that, but that were cut out of the film and then they lost the audio or whatever. And there are some scenes that they shot, but all that survives are a couple of stills from there. So I think even if you get the one that says unrated on it or uncut on it, I don't think that's the case. I don't know if there's a completely uncut one floating around anywhere. But because there were so many different versions of it.
Movie industry was different back then.
The
way theaters did stuff too. There were some things that were just limited release that basically nobody ever saw it.
Yeah.
Because it was only just in one little small, region.
Yeah.
Local filmmakers and stuff.
Right. And I think that, that's definitely the case with a lot of these kind of exploitation films. And, so many years have gone by now that it's you don't even know, what the original movie was supposed to look like or even,
I think Manos' Hands of Fate really wasn't seen. When that just seen in the
No,
local
that was
theater.
because he was just from Texas.
Yeah.
And I think it got... honestly, I think Mystery Science Theater was responsible for that movie.
That's an excellent movie.
Getting a much wider audience because I don't think anyone would have really known much about it.
It's an excellent movie when it has riffing over the top of it.
It is, yeah.
It's not on its own.
Well, I think I've mentioned this before, but I would love to see somebody with the budget kind of redo that because I think it's a good idea. I like
That's
the
good idea.
I like the idea of it. I just think it wasn't executed all that well because they didn't have the money.
Yeah.
Or the know-how, or anything.
Kind of both.
but it still had kind of a vibe that I was kind of into.
There was a germ of a good idea. But
That's what
Manos, Hands of Fate? Hands of Fate?
Yeah.
Hands of fate.
Hands.
Manos, hands of fate.
It's like jazz hands, but
jazz hands.
But it's hands.
Doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the plot of Last House on the Left. Now, like I said, it's very straightforward. There's a girl named Mary Collingwood, and it's like, I think it's her 17th birthday. And her and her friend Phyllis, kind of the bad girl, they're going to go to this concert, and the band is called Bloodlust, which I love. That was another movie that was on Mystery Science Theater about a guy that hunted people on his private island, just like in Most Dangerous Game. Yeah. But yeah, so they're going to see this band Bloodlust and the mom and dad are kind of like, oh, we don't like you hanging out with Phyllis. She's a bad influence, and you're really going to see a band called Bloodlust. Oh man. But so they let her go. They give her a necklace with like a peace symbol before she leaves. Now, while they're out, before they go to the concert, they're like, oh, we want to buy some marijuana. And so they run into this guy named Junior. Now, prior to them running into the guy named Junior, they have heard on the radio that this dude named Krug, who is a serial killer and a rapist, has escaped from prison. And that he's running around with his son, who is Junior, who he got addicted to heroin when he was a little kid. Because that's how you do, I guess. Dad of the year. And also their collective girlfriend, sort of, whose name is Sadie. And there's also this other guy named Weasel. It's Fred Podowski or something like that. But he's called Weasel. He's like a child molester. So these four degenerates are staying in this apartment or something. So they run into Junior, who is kind of like the most innocuous of them. And they're like, hey, do you know where we can get some weed? And he's like, yeah, I know where you can get some weed. Why don't you come back to this apartment? We'll sell you some weed. So, unfortunately, it was the 70s, and like someone said they had weed, so he went back to the apartment to get some weed, man. And
that's how it happened.
As it turned out, when they get to the apartment, all of them are there. They lock the girls in, they won't let them leave. One of them gets gang raped. And then the next morning, they pretty much tie the girls up. They put them in the trunk of a car. They take them out to the woods, but it turns out that the place where they take them is not that far behind Mary's house, like the house where her parents live. Now, while this is all going on, Mary's parents are setting up her birthday party, like it's going to be a surprise party. So it's really weird because it's like intercut between, these horrible criminals, like doing these horrible things to these girls. And then these two, like parents, like doing goofy shit, like decorating the cake. And then there's like these two cops that are sort of like comic relief, and they're doing all this like stupid shit. And so the tone of it's very tonally, like there's a lot of tonal whiplash going on in this, which I think a lot of people find off-putting, because I think that Wes Craven did that on purpose because he wanted to show, it's like, ooh, look at all this horrible shit going on, and then he wanted to juxtapose it.
Yeah,
like with this almost like comedic, well, it's not even almost comedic, it is comedic. Like straight up.
Well, that goes back to, like serial killers and the guys that actually make videos. It doesn't look real because there's no impact on them, what they're doing, really.
Yeah.
They'll do something horrible with some chick and they're just like, they're cool with it. And then they're like joking in between each other, between themselves and, like it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So.
But I think so. He was trying to. I mean, that's
the movie
something.
Kind of does that.
Well, it's something that a lot of horror movies, I think nowadays, probably do too, where they're kind of like trying to juxtapose. Like sometimes they'll have this scene of like horrible, brutal violence with like this happy pop song like on top of it. You know what I mean? If wasn't there that scene in fucking Reservoir Dogs where he was cutting off the guy's ear and it was playing like that Steelers Wheel song or Stuck in the Middle with You or whatever. And I think that's kind of the sort of thing that he was shooting for here. Now, it should be noted that David A. Hess, the guy who plays Krug in this movie, also did all the music for this movie because I think this was his first film as an actor. He went on to be in a bunch of other exploitation films too. But he was primarily a musician and a songwriter. Now, I'm going to say right now that if David Hess had not been in this movie, like as Krug, I don't think it would have been as good because that dude seems like a straight up psychopath. And from everything that they said on the set, they said that he was real method and that he was like scared the shit out of the other cast members because he was like, he would keep like aloof from them and like be kind of all stoic and shit. And then sometimes he would like jump out at them with a knife, like to freak them out. And he acted like that all the time while they were shooting the movie. And they said that the girl that played Mary, like during the real violent scenes, like where she was getting raped and he was like carving his name in her chest and all this other kind of stuff, like she was actually legit scared of him. And she's like, so a lot of the reactions that you see from her in this movie were real because they weren't really sure like what he was going to do exactly, because he just seemed like a crazy person. So I think that really elevates this movie. Because he just seems like such a skis. You know what I mean? Like in real life. I don't know if he is. I've heard he's actually a pretty nice dude. But every time I see him in a movie, he just comes across as like such a realistic psychopath that I think he really, really makes this work. Because I think he's a really good actor. He's easily the best actor in this. Because some of the other ones are kind of, you know. Now, interestingly, too, the woman that plays Sadie in this, I heard that the script for the movie originally wanted a woman that was much older, that was like in her 40s. But they found this woman, she was actually playing one of the Manson family girls, like on there was like an off-Broadway play in the 70s about the Manson murders.
And she's actually cute.
She is, yeah. She's like a fucking psycho, too. Yeah.
Worked.
But yeah, it really did. Like I said, there's kind of like, I've watched a lot of reviews of this, and this movie, I think its reputation is kind of like greater than its actual, because when you see it now, it's still upsetting, it's still shocking, but I think it was a lot more shocking at the time.
Yeah, you know, they weren't as toughened up as we are.
Well,
we see all kinds of imagery. Doesn't bother us. Yeah,
I mean, I think at the time people had never really seen much of anything like that, where the violence was so, I mean, they're just, this girl's getting fucking raped. Now, I heard that, and I don't think this is in my version, because my version says uncut, but they said it's a lie. Because I think there was a longer version. Now, there was a version where they made the two girls, like, have sex with each other. There was part of that in my thing, but I think that it was longer, and they cut some of it out. There was also a scene where Sadie, the psychopath girl, rapes one of the girls, and I don't think that's in my version. I think that's a lost scene, and I don't even know if that one's in any. If you have a version of it that has that in, let me know, because I don't think it's in mine, and mine says it's uncut. So there was some stuff that was still taken out and that has never been restored, as far as I know. Now, the interesting thing about this too is that, so as I said, they do all these horrible things to these girls. Like, you know, one of the girls gets Krug's name carved in her chest. They both get raped. They both get gang raped, essentially. One of them gets stabbed and has her intestines pulled out. And then after Mary is raped, she goes off into like a lake or something, like to watch, and then he just like assassinates her.
I think he shoots her.
Yeah. Now the creepy thing about that is that I think the best scene of the movie is that scene, because after it happens, you know, she's laying there, you know, after he's raped her, and then she gets up and kind of pulls her pants back up, and then she just goes and she throws up like in the bushes, and then she just kind of wanders. She's obviously in shock, and she like wanders off to the water, and all of the degenerates, the criminals, are like looking at her almost like and the looks on their faces, like they're like, oh shit, what have we done? Almost like they realize the monstrosity of it. You know what I mean? And then when they shot her, like when Krug shoots her, he just like shoots her in the back. He's almost like, oh, well, I guess I got to do this now. It's not like he didn't get any enjoyment out of it. It's almost like they felt like they did all this shit, but that was like a bridge too far. They had gone too far, and they realized like what they had done.
Well, they didn't want to get caught. They couldn't.
Well, that too. Yeah. So that whole thing. And then, like I said, just like in the Ingmar Bergman movie, which I actually haven't seen, even though I've read several synopses of it. Just like in that one, the criminals end up at the home of Mary's parents without knowing that that's whose house it is. They come there like saying that they are traveling salesmen or something like that, and that one of them's hurt and they need like a place to stay or whatever. Now the parents let them stay there, even though, you know, they're worried that their daughter's missing and everything, but they're like, oh, okay, well, these people need help and whatever. But the mom overhears them talking about killing Mary and where the body is and stuff, and sees one of them wearing her necklace. So they go out and they find Mary's body, and then they come back and they proceed to lay waste to the fucking criminals. Now the mom, she takes one of them and like says, "Oh, look, I love you so much, and I'm gonna give you a blowjob," and then she bites his dick off. They set up traps around the house, which actually it kind of Wes Craven, directed this movie, also famously directed Nightmare on Elm Street, which there's a lot of like parallels between this movie and that one, like including all the setting up shit in the house, like, oh, I'm gonna electrocute, like if you touch the doorknob it'll electrocute you and stuff like that. Like the dad did that in Last House on the Left, and then Nancy did it in Nightmare on Elm Street. So there was like kind of some similarities between like in themes and stuff, which some people have also pointed out. So the parents end up exacting revenge on the killers in like horrible ways, and then at the end, like the sheriff shows up and like the dad has a chainsaw and he's just like chainsawed fucking Krug or whatever, and then they're all like, "Oh, what have we done?" and stuff. I'm like, well, you just took out the trash, that's what you did. But the whole point of the movie was that what would it take for like these normal people to just go off and just go fucking medieval on the people's asses, because they did. They like fucked them all up.
Yeah.
So
back in the day, that's a pretty mind-blowing flick, I think.
Yeah.
All the sex, the violence, then how it went down. But this same basic storyline, it kind of got retold over and over again. You see a lot of this in modern horror movies. I think the only thing that's different is that it has kind of by today's standards, it's very high. It's hypersexual. They're using porn stars, basically, for a thing.
Yeah.
Kind of hypersexual, and it's going way too far. You couldn't get away with this kind of shit today. And it's tacky. It's just fucking very tacky the way it looks. Well,
yeah. Like I said, it looks like a snuff film, which a lot of films from the 70s did, which I think was what bothered a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it's worth seeing just, for the experience if you're into film.
It's more an important film than an enjoyable film. It's definitely not enjoyable.
It's not fun. It's not very fun.
It's not a fun flick. Not at all.
No. And it's also, to me, not that... It's weird, but it's not that shocking.
Especially not nowadays.
Not nowadays.
In the 70s it was, for sure.
But it's just kind of... It's very much in bad taste. That's really what kind of stands out.
Although I would argue,
get this movie made today,
and I think that, they did a remake of it in 2009, which I'll mention in a minute.
Was it like this?
Yes.
Okay. Did it have a theatrical
It was similar.
Release?
Yeah.
It did.
It did.
Okay. Guess I was wrong. I didn't think you could get this movie made today.
Oh, I definitely think you could. Honestly, I think movies today are a lot worse than they were back then. I think it's interesting to see these. Just because, I love this movie, but, I'm an older person. I can see how a younger person might not be into it and be like,
the whole rape
whatever.
dynamic thing, I think that's kind of, people don't want to see that nowadays. I don't think.
Maybe not, but, they did put it in the remake because they wanted it to be similar, and Wes Craven produced the remake as well. They changed a couple things up, and one thing, and this is a spoiler alert if you haven't seen the 2009 remake, Mary actually lives at the end. She does get gang raped and all the other horrible shit happens to her, but she does actually, they do pull her through. She does not live in this. Nobody lives in the first one. Everybody fucking dies except for the parents are still alive. But all the criminals die and both of the girls die. But in the remake, and also in the remake, I heard that the character of Krug, who's played by the same guy that plays John Dory on Fear the Walking Dead, gets his head blown up in a microwave. So there's
the closest thing to this movie I've ever seen in modern terms would be something like House of a Thousand Corpses. About like that.
It has a similar kind of vibe to that. Yeah. And like I said, if you've seen that kind of stuff, or if you're into like torture porn or anything like that, this is not going to shock you at all.
No.
You know what I mean? Because
kind of had that same vibe though to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? With weirdos. Broken down fucking 1970s. Losers doing bad shit to people.
Yeah, exactly.
That's basically what you're talking about.
And, I wanted to say, too, that...
Although I'd say House of a Thousand Corpses was better.
As a film, I would probably agree with you. Yeah. Like I said, I think this film is important to see. If you're into horror, it's important to see because it was a very important film for the time. But... is it as good? Is it as enjoyable? Well, obviously it's not going to be enjoyable because it's horrifying. But, it's not like the production values are very low. Like it's like watching a porno movie. And honestly, I think it was conceived as a porno earlier, but they kind of softened it in later iterations. They were going to show more of the I think all of the violence was left in, but they were going to show more of like the actual sex, like more of a hardcore type movie. And then they decided not to because I guess they wanted a wider release.
You could probably get away with it back then because of the way things were rated too. I don't think they had any problems mixing sex and violence and in pornography back then. Later, I think there was some certain agreements from the porn industry that they wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, honestly, I think the first...
In the 70s, they probably didn't care.
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, the first title of this movie was The Sex Crime of the Century. Yeah. That's what it was supposed to be called. And then it was going to be called Krug and Company. But they did some test screenings and people didn't really like that title. And then this guy that was, he was a marketing guy and he was a friend of Sean Cunningham who was producing the movie. And he said, oh, you should call it Last House on the Left. And Wes Craven did not like that title because he's like, that doesn't have anything to do with the movie. Not really. But that actually ended up really like, because it's an evocative title. Which, you know what I mean?
Doesn't make any sense for the movie, though.
It doesn't, but it doesn't matter.
Right.
I mean, yeah, you could say, well, Last House on the Left, because, the Collingwood house where the people ended up, where the criminals ended up, I don't know if it was the last house on the left of the street, but that's,
You could say that.
You could say that. So,
Right,
you know what I mean? So you have some plausible deniability there. Also, I should say that the marketing campaign for this movie was probably one of the things that, really kind of catapulted it into, like, success, because they had that fucking, that whole campaign of, like, to keep yourself from fainting, just remind yourself it's only a movie, it's only a movie, it's only a movie. And you know what I mean? They had somebody chanting it over and over. Now, there are differing stories about this, because I think Cunningham said that, or Sean Cunningham, or the guy that he knew that was doing the marketing, was just like, oh, I showed this cut of it to my wife, and she put her hands over her face and didn't want to watch it, so I was just like, it's only a movie, so I wanted to use that. But I'm going to point out right here that H.G. Lewis's Color Me Blood Red, which is probably my favorite H.G. Lewis movie. I like it better than Blood Feast. But also used the same it's only a movie or it's just a movie or something like that in their thing. And there was also another movie called Straight Jacket that came out in 1965 that also used like a similar marketing thing. But it was like that marketing, kind of tagline was so successful that variations of it were used like for horror movies like from then on. But I think that was like one of the things, and I think that's one of the main things that people remember about Last House on the Left today is that marketing campaign with it's only a movie to avoid fainting, blah blah blah, it's only a movie, it's only a movie. I want to say too, it's like really funny because the fucking the Mario Bava film, Twitch of the Death Nerve, also known as Bay of Blood, which was kind of like what Friday the 13th Part 1 and 2 kind of ripped off. That was also released in some markets as Last House on the Left 2 or Last House 2. So continuing the Italian tradition of like taking a movie that has nothing to do with this other movie and saying, yeah, it's totally a sequel. Yeah. It's totally a sequel to that movie. So that's something that I wanted to mention as well. But yeah, like I said, so if you haven't seen this movie, like I said, you should probably see it, especially if you like kind of rape revenge movies. It's sort of like, as I said, it has kind of like a more quote unquote intellectual pedigree because it was based on an Ingmar Bergman film, but it's kind of like a grindhouse version of that, I guess. But the story is pretty much the same. So, take of that what you will. Also, if you've seen the 2009 remake, let me know because I think I saw it, but it was so long ago that I don't really remember it, and I just like read a quick synopsis of it just to see if it was the same. It's a similar story, but like I said, Mary lives at the end instead of getting killed, but other than that, it seemed pretty similar. But it looked like the violence was about at the same level. And I've read, reviews of it and stuff like that. Some people liked it better than the original because they said the production values were much better and it was just much better done. But, Wes Craven, it was his first movie other than all the porn that he doesn't like to talk about doing.
I understand it was an important movie. I didn't particularly enjoy the movie, though, too much.
Yeah, like I said, it's not an enjoyable film to watch. Even if you like the movie, which I do, it's not an enjoyable film.
I don't like movies like this.
Yeah.
No, none of them.
Yeah. I can see that.
It's just not my thing.
Well, like I said, it's a realistic...
Yeah, not my thing.
And honestly, it kind of reminds me... This movie and I Spit on Your Grave, I kind of like... I kind of think these are sort of like too similar vibe. It's like I like both of these movies, but they are you have to really be in the right mood to watch them, because like particularly the rape scenes and stuff like that, they're like so icky and like so realistic. I would never
be in the right mood to watch this. I can understand dudes. Yeah. I like to watch dudes shooting each other to pieces or cutting each other with swords, you know, like you know, what was it, 300 and all that. Yeah. I like that kind of shit. I don't like, you know, watching people screw over innocent people. I'm just not into it.
Yeah, I know you're not. Well, like I said, it's only a movie. It's only a movie.
Now I can only turn that shit off, too.
Indeed, you can. You have the right to do that. All right, let's wrap up this discussion of Wes Craven's 1972 Last House on the Left. Check it out if you haven't already, or don't, whatever. It's only a movie. You can do whatever you want. Yeah. Then remember, if you like the show, like, share, subscribe on all your social media. If you'd like to financially support the show, you can go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/13o'clockpodcast, or go to our blog, 13o'clockpodcast.wordpress.com, and there's a button in the sidebar to a PayPal account if you'd like to make a one-time donation. It would be much appreciated. Remember, these here movie retrospectives, which are usually old movies. They come out every Friday. I also have 13 o'clock matinee, which is 3 new movies in the theater. That comes out every Sunday. And our regular episodes come out every Tuesday, so check them out if you haven't already. And please subscribe to our YouTube show if you're not already a subscriber. We will see you next time. Bye.